The sultry air of London in the summer of 1858 hung thick with the stench of decay, a foul miasma that curled through the streets like a living thing. The once proud Thames, which wound its way through the heart of the city, had become a sluggish, contaminated ribbon, choked with refuse and the detritus of an unyielding industrial march. Factories belched smoke into the sky, obscuring the sun and casting a pall over the bustling metropolis. The clashing of iron and the clatter of horse-drawn carts melded into a cacophony that accompanied the relentless rhythm of progress. As the population surged from 1 million souls in 1800 to over 2.5 million by the decade's midpoint, the city teetered on the edge of chaos. In the narrow alleys of the East End, human life thrived amid squalor. Children, barefooted and grimy, darted between the legs of adults who hustled to and fro, their faces etched with the weariness of endless toil. Men and women labored in factories, their hands stained with soot, eyes dull from the flickering light of gas lamps that flickered like dying stars. Amongst the throng, a grim specter loomed, the specter of cholera. It began as whispers of illness, rumors that flitted between tenements and market stalls, a ghostly warning that something terrible was unfolding. Yet, the people, caught in the grind of survival, paid little heed to the signs. The disease struck swiftly, a cruel thief in the night, snatching away breath and vitality with each passing hour. In the heart of the city, Dr. John Snow, a man of quiet determination and keen intellect, combated the tide of despair. He had been studying the patterns of the disease, mapping its spread with the precision of a cartographer charting new lands. His investigations led him to the infamous Broad Street pump, a wooden spout that had become a focal point of infection. The waters drawn from it had become tainted, a deadly elixir that coursed through the veins of the unsuspecting populace. With urgency, Snow rallied the local authorities, imploring them to remove the handle of the pump. "It is the source of the poison," he insisted, his voice steady but urgent as he stood before an assembly of skeptical officials. Yet the weight of tradition and ignorance bore heavily upon them. The miasma theory, long held and deeply entrenched, ruled their understanding of illness. To speak of contaminated water seemed to challenge the very fabric of their beliefs. As the handle was finally removed, a flicker of hope emerged amid the despair. The death toll began to wane, but the battle was far from over. As families mourned their losses, the stench of the streets grew more pungent. Refuse piled high, and the city's sanitation systems, overwhelmed and neglected, became a breeding ground for disease. Rubbish lay in heaps, a testament to the rapid industrialization that had birthed this crisis. Through the haze of smoke and the cries of the afflicted, a stark realization took root. The city could not continue in this manner, for progress and neglect could not coexist. The Industrial Revolution, heralded as a new dawn, cast shadows that threatened to consume the very heart of London. The struggle for cleanliness, for life itself, was only just beginning, and as the summer wore on, the city stood at a precipice, poised between the promise of a brighter future and the specter of ruin. The summer of 1858 bore down upon London with a relentless heat, the sun casting a glaring light upon the city's streets, illuminating the grime and filth that clung to them like an unwelcome shroud. Beneath the bustling surface, the Thames River writhed in a state of despair, its once proud waters now a spectral hue of brown and black, choked with the refuse of a city that had long abandoned its respect for nature. The fetid stench wafted through the air, a noxious miasma that permeated the very fabric of daily life. As the clock struck noon, the street hawkers and market vendors called out, their voices mingling with the cries of children playing near the riverbank, oblivious to the potential danger that lurked just beyond the confines of their laughter. They splashed in the shallows, their innocence at odds with the grim reality of their surroundings. The Thames, a vital artery of commerce and travel, had become a repugnant sewer where the detritus of human existence mingled with industrial waste, creating a cocktail of disease. A group of laborers, weary from their toil, gathered near a dilapidated wharf. They exchanged grim tales of sickness and death. Cholera had claimed the lives of many, sweeping through the tenements like a spectral hand. "Have you heard? Another outbreak in the East End," one man muttered, wiping the sweat from his brow with a grimy handkerchief. "We'll all be laid low soon enough." His companions nodded, their faces etched with concern, the specter of illness casting a long shadow over their camaraderie. Not far away, a procession of carts rumbled along the cobblestones, laden with barrels of waste. The drivers, their faces gaunt and weary, maneuvered through the throngs, their cargo destined for the river. Each barrel tipped at an angle as they approached the water's edge, spilling its contents into the murky depths. As if the Thames were a bottomless pit, eager to consume the city's filth, the great river, once a source of life, now groaned under the weight of its burden. As the sun dipped low in the sky, casting an orange glow over the polluted waters, a figure emerged from the shadows. It was Sir Joseph Bazalgette, a man resolute in his vision for a cleaner London. He surveyed the river with a discerning eye, noting the grim reality that had unfolded before him. The stench was unbearable, and he could almost hear the cries of the suffering echo in his ears. Bazalgette had long warned the city of the impending calamity, advocating for a comprehensive sewer system that would divert the waste away from the Thames and into treatment facilities. The authorities, however, had dismissed his proposals as fanciful, too costly for a city already drowning in its own refuse. Now, with cholera claiming lives by the day, the urgency of his mission weighed heavily upon him. Determined, he took a step forward, his resolve solidifying like the concrete he envisioned for the sewers of London. There was no time for hesitation. The safety of the city hung in the balance. The Thames must be reclaimed, restored to its former glory, and as he watched the sun set over the polluted waters, Bazalgette knew that the battle for the health of London had begun. The fight would be arduous, but the stakes were nothing less than the lives of the very people who called this city home. The summer of 1858 descended upon London with a ferocity that left its inhabitants gasping for respite. By June, the sun had assumed a tyrannical reign, casting a relentless glare upon the cobblestones and brick facades of the city. The air, thick with humidity, clung to the skin like a damp shroud, rendering each breath a laborious task. The streets, usually bustling with the clatter of hooves and the chatter of vendors, now bore a stifling silence, punctuated only by the occasional cry of a street urchin or the distant rumble of a cart laden with goods, struggling under the weight of the season's oppressive heat. In the heart of London, the Thames, once a shimmering ribbon of life, had transformed into a stagnant cesspool. The river, long a conduit of commerce and vitality, now languished under the oppressive sun. Its waters, choked with the refuse of industry and the detritus of human habitation, emitted a noxious miasma that curled through the streets, creeping into homes and shops, turning stomachs and wrinkling noses. The foul odor, a ghastly amalgamation of decay and filth, infiltrated every corner of the metropolis, leaving citizens clamoring for some reprieve from the olfactory assault. As the temperature soared, so too did public discontent. Meetings were convened in the smoky back rooms of taverns and in the shadowy recesses of public houses, where weary workers and indignant middle-class citizens gathered to voice their grievances. "The river has become a grave," one gentleman declared, his face flushed not just from the heat, but from indignation. "We cannot breathe, and we cannot live in such filth." His words resonated through the crowd, igniting a collective fury that simmered just beneath the surface. In the days that followed, the stench intensified, a grim reminder of the city's inadequate sanitation system. The Thames, once a vital artery of London's lifeblood, now seemed to conspire against its citizens. The heat accelerated the decay of organic waste, exhuming a fetid bouquet that clung to the very atmosphere. Families shuttered their windows, desperate to keep the loathsome air at bay, but the stench seeped in regardless, a vile specter haunting every household. As the crisis deepened, the City of London's authorities scrambled to address the escalating outrage. The ever-earnest Sir Joseph Bazalgette, chief engineer of the Metropolitan Board of Works, found himself in the eye of the storm, facing mounting pressure to devise a solution. His plans for a comprehensive sewer system, long relegated to the realm of dreams, now took on an urgent imperative. "We must cleanse our city," he declared at a hastily arranged meeting, his voice cutting through the murmur of discontent. "A new sewer system will not only save our river, but also safeguard our health." Yet as the days dragged on, the heat bore down mercilessly, and the Thames remained a foul mirror of the city's neglect. The citizens, emboldened by their shared misery, began to take to the streets in protest. They marched, carrying banners that read, "Clean our river," and "Health for all." Their voices rose in a cacophony of demands, echoing off the walls of Parliament, a clarion call for change in the face of decay. The summer heatwave of 1858 had become a crucible, forging a new resolve among the people of London. With their city mired in a stench of its own making, they stood at the threshold of transformation, united in their demand for a cleaner, healthier future. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting an eerie twilight over London, a foul odor began to seep into the very fabric of the city. The warm July air, thick with humidity, carried the stench of decay from the River Thames, which had become a stagnant cesspool. A noxious miasma clung to the streets, twisting through the narrow alleys and wafting into the homes of the city's denizens, causing a rising tide of panic. Residents, their faces drawn and pallid, began to emerge from their dwellings, clutching handkerchiefs to their noses and whispering fears of disease. Children, once frolicking in the streets, now huddled close to their mothers, their laughter replaced by anxious murmurs. The scent of putrefying refuse and human waste was unmistakable, and as it intensified, so too did the sense of foreboding among the populace. In the bustling marketplace of Covent Garden, vendors hastily packed their wares, their voices rising in a cacophony of alarm. "Cholera, cholera," they cried, casting furtive glances toward the murky river that had long been the lifeblood of the city, now perceived as its greatest threat. The news spread like wildfire, igniting a frenzy of fear that gripped the hearts of the citizens. Panic-stricken mothers clutched their children tightly, while elderly men leaned heavily on canes, their brows furrowed with worry. In the shadow of the Houses of Parliament, a crowd gathered, their faces a grim tableau of anxiety and anger. They clamored for attention, demanding that their leaders address the mounting crisis. "We cannot endure this stench any longer," a voice cried out from the throng. "What is the government doing to protect us?" The shouts reverberated through the cobblestone streets, echoing off the stone facades of the buildings that loomed above them, indifferent to the rising tide of fear. As the evening progressed, the air grew heavier with dread. A physician, his coat stained and crumpled, pushed his way through the throng, his expression grave. "We must act swiftly," he called out, his voice barely audible over the tumult. "This air is poison. We cannot allow the filth of the river to seep into our homes." The crowd fell silent, their eyes wide with apprehension, as he outlined the dire consequences that awaited them if the situation continued unchecked. In the halls of power, however, deliberations were slow. The politicians, ensconced in their plush offices, debated the situation, while the city outside simmered with unrest. Many dismissed the concerns as mere hysteria, clinging to the notion that the fears of the populace were unfounded. Yet as the smell grew more unbearable, the voices of the citizens rose in unison, echoing with the urgency of their plight. It became evident that the specter of disease was no longer an abstract fear. It loomed large over London, a tangible threat that demanded immediate attention. As night fell, the glow of gas lamps flickered in the murky haze, casting long shadows across the faces of the frightened crowd. The Thames, once a symbol of commerce and vitality, had transformed into a harbinger of dread. The clamor of the citizens reached a fever pitch, a desperate plea for action against the encroaching darkness that threatened to swallow their city whole. The stage was set, and the fate of London hung precariously in the balance, teetering on the brink of chaos. As the clock struck 11, a palpable tension enveloped the House of Commons, the air thick with the acrid scent of decay that wafted through the open windows. London, in the summer of 1858, lay under the oppressive weight of the Great Stink, a foul miasma emanating from the River Thames, where refuse and sewage had long been permitted to fester unchecked. The stench, now a tangible specter haunting the city's streets, had become a relentless torment to the inhabitants, yet its most dire implications had thrust themselves into the halls of Parliament, demanding an urgent reckoning. Members of Parliament filled the chamber, their faces wreathed in concern, the usual decorum overshadowed by the urgency of the day. Sir Benjamin Hall, the first Commissioner of Works, stood to address the gathering, his voice steady despite the rising clamor among the benches. "Honorable gentlemen," he began, his eyes sweeping across the sea of anxious faces, "we stand on the precipice of a grave crisis. The air of our great city is no longer merely unpleasant. It poses a dire threat to our health and our very lives." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd, punctuated by the rustle of starched papers and the creaking of wooden benches. The stench had become unbearable even in the hallowed chamber, and with it came the specter of cholera, a disease that had claimed thousands in previous outbreaks. The specter loomed larger each day, and the fear that disease could once again ravage London sent ripples of anxiety through the assembly. From the back, a voice rose above the din. Mr. John Bright, the Radical MP, his face flushed with indignation. "We cannot afford to turn a blind eye to this calamity whilst the people suffer. The poor are dying in their hovels, their children gasping for breath in the fetid air. How long will we let this continue?" His words ignited a spark of fervor, and the chamber buzzed with a renewed fervency. "Indeed, what of our sanitation?" interjected Mr. Robert Lowe, his tone laced with urgency. "This is not merely a matter of inconvenience. This is a question of our moral duty as representatives. The existing infrastructure is woefully inadequate. We must act decisively, lest we invite further calamity upon our heads." As they debated, the atmosphere grew thicker, not just with the stench that clung to their clothes, but with the weight of their collective responsibility. Each member felt the burden of their office pressing down upon them, the specter of disease hanging over their heads like a guillotine ready to fall. The clock ticked on, minutes stretching into hours as they weighed proposals for a new sewer system, a costly endeavor that would require significant investment and political will. Yet, the consequences of inaction loomed larger still. Voices rose in passionate argument, some advocating for immediate reforms, while others cautioned against the financial ramifications that such bold measures would incur. As the discussions grew heated, the air of the chamber crackled with anticipation. The stakes were not merely parliamentary, they were life and death for the citizens of London. The pleas of the desperate echoed in the minds of the members. A chorus of the afflicted demanding justice in the face of negligence. Finally, as the sun dipped low over Westminster, casting long shadows through the windows, a fragile consensus began to form. A motion was proposed, an emergency allocation of funds to develop a comprehensive sewage system. The decision would not come without its trials, but in that moment, amidst the stench and the fervor, a glimmer of hope emerged. The House of Commons, battered but resolute, faced the crisis head-on, vowing to confront the great stink and its deadly implications before it consumed the heart of the city. In the sweltering heat of July 1858, the air in the House of Commons was thick with tension, a miasma of sweat and anticipation swirling among the gathered lawmakers. The chamber, adorned with dark wood and gilded accents, echoed with the fervent voices of men who had long evaded the pressing issue that lay before them. Outside, the streets of London wore a shroud of filth, the stench of raw sewage mingling with the summer air, a noxious blend that heralded decay rather than the vibrancy of life. The city, once a beacon of progress and industry, was now plagued by the unsightly remnants of human existence. The Thames, swollen and sluggish, bore the burdens of 1,000,000 souls, its waters thick with waste. Reports of cholera outbreaks had spread like wildfire. Neighborhoods lay stricken, families shattered by the unseen hand of disease. The specter of mortality loomed over the populace, yet action had been slow, impeded by the inertia of bureaucracy and the reluctance to invest in what many considered a mere inconvenience. Amidst the clamor of debate, Sir Joseph Bazalgette rose to his feet, his frame tall and imposing, a figure of reason amidst the chaos. His voice rang out with authority, cutting through the din of rival opinions. "Gentlemen, we stand at a precipice. The time for inaction is at an end. Our great city teeters on the brink of crisis, and it is our solemn duty to act." His eyes swept across the chamber, searching for allies among the sea of furrowed brows and skeptical glances. The response was immediate, a wave of voices rising in disagreement and apprehension. Some argued fervently that the proposed sewage system would drain the treasury dry, that the coffers could ill afford such ambitious plans. Others pointed to the specter of taxation, a specter that haunted the very heart of the populace. Yet Bazalgette pressed on, undeterred by the cacophony. "Every moment we delay costs lives. What price shall we assign to the well-being of our citizens? Can we, in good conscience, allow our fellow men to suffer? A system of proper drainage is not merely a matter of convenience, it is a matter of survival." As the debate raged on, the specter of cholera loomed large in the minds of the lawmakers. The grim statistics of mortality were whispered among them, each number a stark reminder of the consequences of neglect. The ghost of the previous summer's epidemic hung heavy in the air, a testament to the urgency of their task. The voices of the opposition began to waver, fear seeping into their resolve as they contemplated the implications of inaction. In a moment of reckoning, a voice emerged from the back benches, a quiet yet resolute figure, Mr. John Simon, the Commissioner of the City of London. "If we choose to ignore this issue, we do so at our peril. The people demand action, and we must answer their call. Delay breeds disaster." His words, simple yet profound, struck a chord with the assembly. At last, a murmured agreement began to ripple through the chamber, a tentative acknowledgement of the truth that had long been evaded. The decision was not without consequence, for the path forward would demand resources, labor, and unwavering commitment. But the gravity of their task was clear. The health of London depended on their resolve. As the sun dipped low in the sky, casting long shadows across the city, the lawmakers made their choice. A vote was called, and with it, the dawn of a new era began. The decision to act was not just a response to crisis. It was a testament to the evolving conscience of a society that could no longer turn a blind eye to its own deterioration. The echoes of that fateful day would resonate through the streets of London for generations to come, a clarion call for public health and the dignity of human life. In the sweltering heat of August 1858, London found itself grappling with an insidious foe. The stench of filth hung heavily in the air, wafting through the streets and clinging to every passerby like a malevolent specter. The River Thames, once a source of life and commerce, had become a fetid channel of decay. With each passing day, the city's health dwindled further, and the specter of cholera loomed ominously over its populace. Amidst this turmoil, Joseph Bazalgette stood resolute in the dimly lit chambers of the Metropolitan Board of Works, papers strewn about him like fallen leaves. He was a man of vision, an engineer whose mind brimmed with the promise of a transformed London. As he prepared to unveil his ambitious proposal, the weight of the moment pressed heavily upon him. This was no simple plan. It was a lifeline thrown into the turbulent waters of despair. The room was packed with board members, their faces a tapestry of skepticism and curiosity. Bazalgette cleared his throat, the air thick with anticipation. "Gentlemen," he began, his voice steady yet fervent, "the Thames is dying, and with it, the very health of our city. We stand at a precipice, teetering on the edge of calamity." The murmurs of discontent rippled through the assembled officials, who were accustomed to the inertia of bureaucracy. With a flick of his wrist, Bazalgette revealed a series of intricate maps and sketches, his designs etched with meticulous precision. "I propose a comprehensive sewer system, a network of intercepting sewers that will divert the filth of our streets away from the river and into treatment facilities beyond the city." His words flowed with the fervor of a preacher, each syllable imbued with the fervent hope that he could inspire change. Yet as he spoke, he noted the furrowed brows and crossed arms of the board members. "You must understand," he continued, The cost of inaction far outweighs the investment in this infrastructure. Cholera struck last year, and it will return if we do not act decisively. He paused, allowing the gravity of his statement to settle over the room. A voice broke the silence, laden with skepticism. "And what guarantees do we have that your scheme will work, Mr. Bazalgette? It is an immense undertaking. And the people will demand results." The challenge hung in the air, a gauntlet thrown at his feet. Bazalgette inhaled deeply, summoning his conviction. The evidence is irrefutable. In cities that have modernized their sewer systems, the incidence of disease has plummeted. We must not merely react to calamity. We must prevent it. He gestured to the maps again, the intricate lines resembling veins of a living organism, pulsating with possibility. As the board members conferred in hushed tones, the weight of their decision bore down upon them. The tension in the room crackled like static electricity, each man aware that they held the fate of London in their hands. Bazalgette could feel their hesitance, the reluctance to venture into uncharted waters. Yet he remained undeterred, fueled by the knowledge that the very survival of the city hung in the balance. At length, the murmurs subsided, and the chair of the board, a stout man with a weary countenance, raised his hand. "Mr. Bazalgette, we shall deliberate your proposal, but know this, should we commit, the eyes of London will be upon us." In that moment, amidst the clamor of doubt and hope, Joseph Bazalgette sensed the tide beginning to turn. The fight for London's future had only just begun. The year was 1858, and London lay shrouded in a thick, oppressive fog, a miasma that clung to the streets like the lingering aftermath of a fever. The River Thames, once a symbol of life and commerce, had become a veritable cesspool, its waters thick with the detritus of a burgeoning city. The stench of human waste and industrial refuse hung heavy in the air, a grim reminder of the public health crisis that loomed ominously over the metropolis. In the heart of the city, Sir Joseph Bazalgette, the chief engineer of the Metropolitan Board of Works, paced restlessly in his modest office. The flickering gaslight cast shadows upon the walls, illuminating maps and plans that detailed his ambitious scheme for a comprehensive sewer system. The urgency of the moment was palpable. The cholera epidemic had struck with devastating ferocity, claiming lives by the hundreds and sowing panic among the populace. Yet, despite the impending catastrophe, the political will to act remained stubbornly elusive. The members of Parliament, entangled in their own petty squabbles and party allegiances, were blind to the impending crisis. But Bazalgette had not come this far to be deterred by ignorance or indifference. He knew that the fate of London lay in the balance, and he was determined to bring his vision to fruition. Armed with blueprints and fervor, he prepared for a crucial meeting with the board. As Bazalgette entered the grand chamber, the air felt charged with tension. The oak-paneled walls bore witness to countless debates, yet today they seemed to echo with the weight of lives lost and lives yet to be saved. The board, a gathering of men in crisp waistcoats and top hats, regarded him with a mix of curiosity and skepticism. They were men of commerce and influence, yet they had little understanding of the true nature of the crisis that gripped their city. "Gentlemen," Bazalgette began, his voice steady despite the tumult within, "the Thames is dying, and so too are we. If we do not act swiftly, we shall see London consumed by disease. I propose a radical overhaul of our sanitation system, a network of sewers that will divert waste away from our river and protect the health of our citizens." A murmur rippled through the assembly, voices rising and falling like the tide. Some scoffed at the proposal, dismissing it as an extravagant expense in a time of uncertainty. Others, however, began to listen intently, their minds racing with the implications. An older gentleman, his face lined with the creases of age and experience, leaned forward. "And what of the cost, Mr. Bazalgette? These plans will require a great deal of funding." "Indeed, they will," Bazalgette replied, the fervor of his conviction igniting a spark of hope. "But consider the cost of inaction. The lives we shall save, the prosperity we can bring to London. This is an investment in the future of our city. The tension in the room shifted, a palpable change in the atmosphere as the gravity of the situation began to sink in. Bazalgette's words hung in the air, weaving a tapestry of urgency and promise. There was a flicker of recognition among the board members, a dawning realization that the time for action had come. After what felt like an eternity, the chairman of the board raised his gavel, a signal to the room to quiet down. "Let us vote on this proposal," he declared, his voice resolute. The vote, though fraught with tension, ultimately tipped in Bazalgette's favor. The allocation of funds was approved, a watershed moment that marked a significant shift in public policy towards sanitation. As Bazalgette stepped out into the foggy London streets, he felt a surge of determination. The battle for public health had just begun, but the tide was turning. The foundations of a new era of urban planning were being laid, and with them, the promise of a cleaner, healthier future for the city he loved. The air was thick with anticipation and dust as the first shovels broke ground on the bustling streets of London in the autumn of 1860. The clatter of pickaxes rang like a distant thunder, echoing through the city's narrow alleys and echoing off the stone facades of grand buildings. Joseph Bazalgette, the chief engineer, stood at the helm of the monumental project, surveying the scene with a mixture of determination and trepidation. The stakes could not have been higher. The health of the city hung in the balance, teetering on the edge of a public health crisis that had claimed thousands. The recent cholera outbreaks, a grim specter haunting the streets, had galvanized the populace into a state of urgency. The River Thames, once the lifeblood of the city, had become a fetid stream, choked with refuse and waste. The stench of sewage was a cruel reminder of the city's failures, a miasma that seeped into the very bones of London. As he watched the laborers toil, Bazalgette felt the weight of responsibility settle heavily upon his shoulders. "Mind your footing," a foreman shouted, his voice rising above the din as workers navigated the treacherous digging site. Wood beams had been hastily erected to hold back the earth, but the ground seemed to shift and sigh, as if the very city conspired against them. Bazalgette noted the fatigue etched on the faces of the laborers, the sweat-soaked shirts clinging to their backs, yet they pressed on, driven by the urgency of their task. Public skepticism lingered like a shadow over the project. Many citizens scoffed at the notion that a grand sewer system could alleviate the plagues that had ravaged their neighborhoods. "Just another folly of the elite," muttered a man leaning against a nearby lamppost, his arms crossed and face twisted with disdain. Bazalgette felt the sting of their doubt, but he had made promises to the people, to the city, to himself. His vision was clear, a network of sewers that would channel waste away from homes and into treatment facilities, safeguarding the health of the populace. As the sun dipped toward the horizon, casting a golden hue over the city, Bazalgette gathered his engineers around the makeshift table of timber and stone. Maps sprawled before them, inked with precise calculations and projections. "We must devise a solution to the gradient issue in the East End," he said, his voice steady but urgent. "If we do not maintain the necessary slope, the system will fail, and we risk flooding our streets with filth." A young engineer, eyes alight with enthusiasm, leaned forward. "What if we incorporate a series of pumps to assist the flow? It could provide the boost we need." Bazalgette nodded, the gears of his mind whirring with possibilities. The solutions were there, hidden beneath layers of soil and doubt, waiting to be unearthed. "Let us be bold," he declared, the fire of conviction igniting within him. "We shall not merely build a sewer, we shall construct a lifeline for London." With renewed vigor, the engineers returned to their work, the sound of tools clinking against stone, resonating like a heartbeat through the city. Each swing of the pickaxe, each shove of the shovel, marked a step toward redemption. As twilight descended, Bazalgette took a moment to gaze upon the laborers, the sweat and grime of their toil illuminated in the fading light. They were not mere workers, they were the architects of change, the builders of a future free from the specter of disease. In that moment, against the backdrop of uncertainty and skepticism, hope flickered like a candle in the dark, resilient and unwavering. The air hung heavy over London in the summer of 1858, thick with the stench of refuse and the oppressive weight of despair. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a pallid glow over the cobbled streets, the cries of street vendors mingled with the distant toll of church bells, a mournful reminder of the city's plight. The River Thames, once a lifeblood of trade and commerce, had become a fetid artery. Its waters choked with waste and the remnants of human life. Illness crept through the alleys like a specter, whispering doom to the unsuspecting. In the heart of the city, a fervent discussion stirred among the members of the Metropolitan Board of Works, their faces illuminated by flickering gas lamps. They had gathered in a dimly lit chamber, the air thick with cigar smoke and urgency. The board's chairman, Sir Joseph Bazalgette, stood at the head of the table, his brow furrowed in concentration. The specter of cholera loomed large. Just months prior, the outbreak had claimed thousands, reducing families to mere shadows of their former selves. Streets once vibrant with life now lay silent, haunted by the memories of those who had succumbed to the disease. "Gentlemen," Bazalgette's voice cut through the haze, steady and resolute, "the time for action is upon us. We cannot allow our city to remain a breeding ground for filth and death. The sewer system we propose is not merely a matter of convenience. It is a moral imperative." He gestured to a map unrolled before them, the proposed network of sewers snaking through the city like a lifeline. This will redirect the waste away from the Thames and into treatment facilities. We must act swiftly and with purpose. The sounds of dissent and concern rippled through the room, punctuated by the tapping of fingers on wooden tables. "But the cost, Sir Joseph. The public will not tolerate such an expense," protested one member, a stout man with spectacles perched precariously on his nose. "The cost of inaction is far greater," Bazalgette countered, his voice rising with conviction. "Every day we delay, lives are lost. We owe it to the citizens of London to provide them with the dignity of health and sanitation." The meeting stretched late into the night, and as the candles flickered low, agreement began to coalesce. With a sense of urgency, they set forth plans to secure funding and rally public support for the ambitious endeavor. Meanwhile, on the streets, the news of impending change began to ripple through the populace. Whispers of a new sewer system ignited hope among the beleaguered citizens. Children, once confined to their homes for fear of disease, ventured out to play, their laughter echoing through the alleys. Yet skepticism lingered. The scars of cholera were too fresh, and faith in the government had been battered. As work commenced, the sounds of pickaxes striking earth and the rumble of horse-drawn carts filled the air. The men toiled with grim determination, their faces lined with sweat and resolve, digging trenches that would cradle the city's salvation. Each shovelful of earth removed was a step toward an unseen future, one where the specter of disease might finally be banished. Months passed, and with each completed section of the sewer, the atmosphere in London began to shift. The stench of decay was replaced by the distant smell of fresh earth, and the riverside, once a site of despair, now offered a glimmer of hope. As the final link of the sewer system fell into place in 1865, the city held its breath. Would this new era of sanitation truly be the dawn of a healthier London? The answer lingered in the air, as palpable as the promise of a brighter tomorrow. In the summer of 1858, the Thames River lay languidly beneath a pallid sky, its once proud waters sullied by the refuse of an industrious metropolis. The stench of decay clung to the air, thick and oppressive, as the city of London grappled with the consequences of its unbridled growth. As the sun cast a wan light upon the murky surface, the river, which had long served as the lifeblood of the city, now bore the weight of neglect and disdain. On the banks, men in bowler hats and women in modest bonnets scurried about their daily business, their faces pinched against the feeder of filth that wafted from the waterway. Barges, once symbols of commerce and trade, lay idle, their hulls coated with a viscous layer of grime. Fishermen, their nets abandoned, spoke in hushed tones of a time when the river brimmed with life, and the air was filled with the hopeful cries of gulls. But those days felt distant, like the fading echoes of a forgotten song. Amidst the turmoil, a vision began to take shape, an ambitious scheme to reclaim the Thames and restore it to its former glory. The architect, Joseph Bazalgette, with his fervent belief in the power of engineering, sought to stem the tide of pollution that choked the river. The people of London remained skeptical, their memories steeped in the acrid reality of the present. Yet, the seeds of a new future were sown as construction commenced on a grand sewer system, a marvel of Victorian ingenuity. As the months wore on, the clamor of pickaxes striking stone and the rhythmic thrum of steam engines filled the air. Workers, clad in threadbare garments, toiled beneath the watchful gaze of their superiors, their sweat mingling with the dust that hung in the heat. Day by day, the foul waters of the Thames began to recede, revealing patches of clearer depths, a tantalizing glimpse of what might be. Hope flickered in the hearts of those who stood by the banks, their gazes drawn to the changing river as if it spoke of redemption. Yet, the undertaking was fraught with challenges. The very earth beneath London seemed to rebel against the excavation, the roots of ancient trees entwined with the foundations of the city, and the walls of the Thames bore witness to the turmoil. "The river will not yield easily," warned one laborer, his voice thick with apprehension. But Bazalgette pressed on, his resolve unwavering, for he understood that the fate of the city rested upon the shoulders of this monumental task. By autumn of that year, the first signs of revitalization appeared. The Thames, once cloaked in a shroud of darkness, shimmered faintly in the sunlight like a forgotten jewel. The waters, while still tainted, revealed glimpses of silver fish darting beneath the surface. Children, with laughter ringing through the air, dared to dip their toes into the shallows, an act of defiance against the past. The river began to breathe anew as merchants rekindled their faith in trade along these waters. As the winter winds whispered through the streets of London, the city braced for transformation. The Thames, a river long shunned and despised, was poised for revival. The visions that had once seemed fanciful began to take root, nourished by the unyielding spirit of a city determined to reclaim its essence. And within that struggle lay the promise of renewal, a testament to the triumph of human endeavor over the specter of decay. The summer of 1858 in London sweltered under an oppressive heat, the air thick with humidity and a stench that clung to the throat like an uninvited guest. The River Thames, once a vibrant artery of commerce and life, now lay fetid and stagnant, choked with refuse and human waste. The Great Stink, as it would come to be known, had descended upon the city, a noxious cloud of decay that seeped into the very fabric of daily life. As the sun rose each day, the pungent aroma wafted from the river, creeping through the narrow streets of Westminster, curling around the grand edifices of Parliament. The House of Commons, a venerable institution of governance, found itself besieged by a palpable discomfort. Members covered their noses with handkerchiefs, eyes watering, as they attempted to debate matters of state, while the stench clung to their clothes like an indelible mark of shame. It was the very air of the city that had turned against them, a grotesque reminder of neglect and indifference. In the alleys of Southwark, the situation was far worse. Children played in the dirt streets, oblivious to the dangers lurking in the shadows of their own neighborhoods. The cries of vendors selling stale bread and fish mingled with the laughter of the young, yet beneath the surface, an unseen peril festered. With each passing day, the mortality rate climbed, a grim statistic that weighed heavily on the shoulders of the city's beleaguered inhabitants. Cholera, that specter of death, stalked the narrow lanes, claiming lives with a swiftness that instilled terror in the hearts of the populace. Dr. John Snow, a physician of quiet determination, traversed the squalid streets, his mind racing with theories and hypotheses. He had long suspected that the source of the disease lay within the very water the citizens consumed. Armed with maps and data, he sought to trace the invisible lines of contagion that spread through the city. The stench of the Thames was more than an inconvenience. It was a herald of doom, a siren that called to the unwary. With each breath, the reality of the Great Stink became a clarion call for reform. Meanwhile, the city's leaders, faced with mounting public outcry, began to convene. The cries for action grew louder, echoing through the halls of power. Despite the resistance of those entrenched in the old ways, the urgency of the situation forced their hands. Sir Joseph Bazalgette, a civil engineer of remarkable vision, emerged as a key figure in the fight against the foul tide. He envisioned a radical overhaul of London's sanitation system, a network of sewers that would redirect the waste away from the Thames and into treatment facilities. His plans, initially met with skepticism, began to gain traction as the death toll rose. The turning point came when the stench reached a crescendo, choking the very spirit of London. Panic gripped the populace, the cries of the afflicted filled the air, and the city became a cacophony of fear. In that moment, the leaders of London could no longer ignore the truth that lay before them. The Great Stink had ignited a flame within the hearts of the citizens, a desire for change, for a future free from the specter of disease. Thus, the Great Stink did not merely signify a moment of crisis, it became a catalyst for transformation. The stench that had enveloped London in a pall of despair would ultimately pave the way for a cleaner, healthier city. As the summer waned, the resolve to rectify the failures of the past solidified, marking the beginning of a new era in public health and sanitation.